Fellow Chelsea supporters, welcome to the Blue Day podcast. And for Chelsea fans everywhere, every day is a blue day. I am your host, the man with a face for podcasting, Keith Lawrence. And as ever, with me today is my comrade in arms. He is a Londoner living it large indoors up north. He's your friend of mine, it's Warren. Warren, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Keith, on this very chilly looking morning. Stuck indoors, as you said, not allowed to go out anywhere, but such is life. Christmas is around the corner, and no matter what the results, it's always good to be a Chelsea fan. So,
now today's episode is going to be a bit different to what myself and Warren normally do. Today we are going to remember one of our own, Carl Wurzel O'Brien. Now, for those of you that caught the show last week on iTunes and YouTube, we did mention we would be paying tribute to Carl. For those of you that perhaps missed last week's show, you can still find it on our available platforms. Just to give you a background, Carl Wurzel O'Brien was a lifelong Chelsea fan. He was an ex-groundsman and an all-round top geezer. His life was unfortunately taken from him on the 23rd of December 2016 at the young age of 55. I personally would like to hand over this segment to my good friend and co-host who had the pleasure of knowing him and his wonderful family. Warren, over to you, my friend.
Thank you very much, Keith, for that lovely intro. As you said, we're both pretty nervous and excited about this. It's something that hasn't really left our minds or our consciousnesses since we decided to do it. Since I first got in touch with James O'Brien, who is a lifelong friend, as all the O'Briens are to me and to all of the Chelsea and football community, really. Since I first got in touch with him with the idea of, me and Keith had this idea of paying tribute to Cole, and like I said, we're both very nervous and excited about it. I suppose I'd very much like to start by thanking the family themselves for allowing us to do this and being so helpful and being so, accommodating with the whole thing. We've got some lovely messages from the family that we're going to read out, and we've got some recorded messages that we're going to be putting in there from his friends and family as well. So thank you so much to all of the O'Briens, his children, Laura and Joe, his brothers, Marcus, Jason, Johnny, his sister Sam, all of his friends and family have been so helpful during this whole thing. And, I know it's very, very difficult for them to talk about, and they've really made an effort. So from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of Keith's heart, and from, the spirit that is the Blue Day podcast and the wider football family and the wider football community, thank you very much to the O'Briens. And this is just mine and Keith's little tribute to the great man, and we hope it's as good as we're trying to make it. So, yeah, just as Keith said there, Cole's life was unfortunately taken from him in December 2016. He was he was a big man in many, many ways. He had the stature of his personality and his warmth, and his laugh and his infectious smile was felt by everyone around him. He was a very big man in stature physically as well. He had his long grey hair. When he got older, it obviously turned a bit greyer, and he was a very tall man. Like I said, he was a very, very warm man as well. You always knew when you was in a room with Cole. I had the pleasure of living next door to him for a number of years when he lived with his sister Sam down in Wallington, Surrey there, which is a place that I'm very, very proud to be from. He was a postman then, so I didn't see him much because he got up at sort of 3:30 in the morning. This is back in the day when postmen used to work hard and they used to deliver your mail, So he used to work quite, so I didn't see him very much, and he obviously spent most of his evenings down a pub or at Chelsea or whatever. He was a lifelong Chelsea fan from his earliest days. His dad, Kevin, the Silver Fox, still going strong. Big up, Kevin. Obviously got him and all the boys into football, and that was his early days really, going to football and watching Chelsea, sitting in the shed, and eventually becoming groundsman at the club during the 70s as well. So had the honour of preparing the pitch and working for the great club that we all love and know and support so well and stuff. So he certainly had a very, very close bond to Chelsea Football Club, a closer bond than most fans could ever wish of having, you know, so he was very, very fortunate in that sense. But fortune usually favours the correct people, and he was like I said, he was a very family orientated man, always had time for his friends and his family, which is sentiments that are echoed in all the messages that we've received at the Blue Day podcast from his family and friends. We've had messages on Twitter about him. As soon as on the show we announced it last week, you know, Twitter, we got messages. There was a guy on there, Paul Hicks. Thank you very, very much, Paul Hicks, for your personal message saying that you knew him and what a great man he was. We've had various other people saying, yeah, I know of this man. I've seen this man's face before. You know, I think it was everything you need to know about the man. The fact that when Chelsea played Hull in, it was January 2017, wasn't it, Keith? You was actually at the game. We spoke about this.
I was there, yes. I was there.
In the 55th minute of that match, to mark his age when he unfortunately passed away, there was a minute's round of applause round the ground, and I know that a lot of his family were in attendance, and the Chelsea family that day was absolutely amazing. I didn't have the pleasure of being at the game that day, but I know that you were, Keith, and I know that, well, I mean, tell me what you told me the other day. You said you had that sense of feeling around the ground of just, there was a real togetherness and stuff.
Well, there was a real warmth about the whole minute when in the 55th minute everyone stood up. Everybody stood up, gave the round of applause during the game.
One Carl O'Brien as well.
Yes,
that was
that chant started. I believe it was in the even in the shed, and then Matthew Harding sort of stands then took it upon themselves to chant it. And you know, at the time I didn't know, obviously, the situation. I only found out afterwards when I got home and I did the research about, who was this Carl? And yeah, it sort of threw me a little bit with, you know, how tragic it was. And to have over 40,000 Chelsea fans doing that, it was...
And everyone at home as well on Match of the Day.
Absolutely.
Night, you know, Jonathan Pearce obviously announced it during Match of the Day. They put it in the highlight programme, which was
there was the banner.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean,
the banner as well.
Well, that's something else that that's very good of you to mention there, Keith, because that's something else that we was going to mention as well. Obviously, you can tell by what we've said already. Not many. I mean, although everyone probably deserves it, not many people get the honour of having a round of applause during a match at Chelsea, it being announced on Match of the Day, being an ex-groundsman at the club. There's obviously the new the new banner that's been unveiled just a couple of years ago at Chelsea of all our past fans that are unfortunately no longer with us. Wurzel is of course on that. Wurzel has a plaque in the shed. Check out the thumbnail for this episode for that. You know, there's going to be pictures and there's going to be a little montage and stuff. We're going to do our best to try and put some stuff together. Neither me or Keith are like expert editors and stuff, so we're really going to try and do our best with it. So sort of bear with us on that one.
We will do it justice.
Yeah, we will absolutely. We're absolutely going to. Yeah, absolutely. But that's just a little bio of the man, as it were. I'm now going to sort of like move on a little bit more and tell you that, you know, as a lifelong Chelsea fan, he didn't just frequent Stamford Bridge during the 70s and the noughties and the 10s, so to speak, when we was brilliant. He was also, this is something that is in a message from his nephew James, which I'm going to read out now. He was Chelsea thick and thin. It didn't matter how we were playing, who was in the team, who the manager was, who the owner was, who should go, who should stay, who earns too much money. He turned up and he sung Carefree every single week, home and away. Didn't matter whether it's Bristol City, Carlisle, Oldham, Old Trafford. Didn't matter whether it was away in Europe when we was having brilliant times winning the Champions League, or other times when we've been less successful in Europe and stuff. I mean, that was something that Chelsea fans of his generation would say, oh, we're playing badly in Europe. We're in fucking Europe, you spoilt little bastard, right? And he comes from that generation of Chelsea fan, and that would be his sentiment. His sentiment would be, okay, so we've just played crap in the cup final. The cup final! We didn't get knocked out in the third round by Grimsby. Do you know what I mean? Like, we was in the cup final. We had a day out at Wembley. We had a great piss up. There was 40,000 Chelsea fans there. It was fucking brilliant. Yeah, we lost. Don't worry, we'll win it next year. That's that generation of football fan, and that's exactly what Wurzel was like, and that's exactly what the O'Briens are like when it comes to support each other. Exactly what a lot of us are like, but unfortunately, not all of us are like these days. But I did get a message from James. he asked me to read out on the podcast, and with great honour, I'd like to read it out now. I'd like to thank Woll, which is me, Warren. My nickname since I was very young has been Sausage Woll, so he calls me Woll. So I'd like to thank Wolls and Keith for taking a bit of time on their show to discuss a topic very close to my heart, my Uncle Carl. He was loved by many and hated by few. If you knew my uncle, you'd know he was a gentle giant to most, unless you were a Tottenham fan. And he didn't quite put Tottenham fan, he put a 3-letter word. But I'm gonna go with Tottenham fan on this one, James. I'm sure you understand. He was a gentle giant to most, unless you was a Tottenham fan, which I think most listeners would understand. Indeed we do, indeed we do. We shared many memories together, football and family related, but hands down my best times are with Wurzel up the Chelsea. He knew how to fill up a room, if it weren't with his size, but with his warmth. He was an honest man and an honest worker. He was never a rich man, but never left a man out at the bar. When I was younger, he gave up his stadium tour ticket so I could go with his son Joe on a tour of the stadium, which was absolutely fantastic. Only being kids at the time, not knowing he was probably making the most of his time without having to look after his children and go to the pub. He took me to FA Cups, League Cups, Premierships, Champions Leagues, but he had a few years on me, so you can imagine what it was like when he had to visit the lovely places in Division 2. But like a phoenix, Chelsea rose out of the ashes and became, and dominated England and the world. He travelled away to European matches, and even flew to Asia on a pre-season tour to watch us, which we have the photo evidence of, don't we, now on the Blue Day?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
To follow Chelsea was his ultimate passion, and to follow Chelsea all over the world, he loved nothing more. But even this had no match for the love that he had for his 2 children, Laura and Joe, 2 fantastic characters with as much wit as the old man. He would and is very proud of them both. I know that we will miss Cole, but his spirit lives on in the family, his friends, and of course the bridge. I love you, Cole, and we will always miss you. I want to thank everyone again for all the love and support me and my family have received through such a shit time in our lives. It will never be forgotten. On a lighter note, this was written before the West Ham match, so could only assume that we smashed the scummy. And then again, he uses a P word. But I think we all know where he's going.
I wanted you to put it in, but you decided.
I think we all know where he's going with that one. It begins with a P. And that even Lampard can stick the whole kit on a banging and hat trick. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to Blue fans all over land and sea. Thanks again, Wolls and Keith. Keep up the great work on the pod. James O'Brien, #Justice for Cole. So that was just a message that James sent over to me during the week. Thank you very, very much, James. I know that it's still a very raw topic. I know that the pain never truly goes away. I mean, we discussed that you just, time helps, but the pain never truly goes away. But we can honour him by living every day the way that he would have, and that's something else that me and James spoke about. So thank you very much for taking the time to write that, James. I know it's very difficult for you to write, and it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. What you say about if he didn't fill up a room with his size, he would with his warmth, because he was a huge man. I mean, like, you wouldn't. Don't get me wrong. Gentle giant, but from a distance you'd avoid him, I tell you. But then you'd see his big Harry and Henderson smile and his soft warm eyes, and he was an absolute. He really was everything that James just described in that. And like he said, he flew away to Asia. He went to Japan to watch Chelsea on a pre-season tour and spent weeks over there and met fans of Chelsea from Japan and was just loved and revered everywhere that he went, really. Is that something that you've ever considered, Keith, doing, going on a pre-season tour like Cole used to, all the way to the other side of the world? I mean, that's some commitment, isn't it?
Warren, I'd love to. It'd be an experience, not just to watch your team play abroad, but just the experience of going to another country and experiencing different cultures. But then on top of it, you're watching your beloved Chelsea.
Well, he was very much like that, Cole. He was somebody who could speak to anybody. I mean, I mean, a good listener, an avid listener of the show, and a very, very good friend of mine, and a very, very good friend of the Blue Day podcast is Steve Boots Humphreys down there, who obviously listens to our show and messages us quite regularly. He's been all over Chelsea with me. He was a very, very close personal friend of Wurzel, and he was a huge metalhead, huge metalhead. He was a huge Saxon fan, which would explain the intro music at the start for anyone that was a bit confused about that. But yeah, so he, you know, culturally he was pretty open. He got on with everyone all the time, and he was very, very easy to get on with. You could just, you know, he loved his kids, he loved his family. That was always his priority as well. You know, he was a black cab driver, he was a postman, he had some of the most traditional jobs that you could ever imagine. You know, like I said, when he was a postman, when they actually used to deliver post and that. But another message that we got, Keith, that I was so grateful to get. It was unbelievable to get this. Was, again, thank you to James for facilitating this, but we got a message from his daughter Laura, and it reads, and I'd like to read this message out directly from her. And again, thank you so much, Laura, for taking time out of your day. I don't appreciate how difficult it is, if the truth be told, because I've never been in this position, so I don't appreciate how difficult it is, but thank you very, very, very much. And here's her message. Firstly, I would just like to thank the Blue Day podcast, both Warren and Keith, for the lovely tribute to our dad. Dad was truly special and unique, not just by appearance, but by his kindness, generosity and humour. We really appreciate the continued love and support from the Chelsea family and Dad's friends. Chelsea always had a special part in Dad's heart, and supporting Chelsea home and away was his passion. The pain of losing Dad is very real and part of our everyday life, but knowing the fond memories people have of him and how much he meant to others brings comfort to all. Rest in peace, Dad, and may we all get justice. #justice for Carl. And that was a tough thing to read for myself personally when I read it, because it's very poignant and it's very, very real. And like she says, the pain of losing Dad is a very real part of everyday life, you know, and it's not just his children. He's had that effect on so many people around him. Like I said, Steve Boots, who is a very, very good friend of him. I know that he won't mind me saying this. He regularly, you know, gets a bit emotional about Cole, especially this time of year. You know what it's like when you're all together and having a drink and you're thinking about people that are no longer with us. I know it's something that still affects people a lot. And this thing, #justice for Cole, obviously, we're not going to go into any kind of details about like the situation or anything. Obviously, we've mentioned that his life was, you know, shockingly taken from him. For any of you that would like to see the details, please look it up, do a bit of research. You know, there's plenty out there, and let's just say that justice has not been brought yet. So that's what the #justice for Cole is about. So I'd like people to maybe get that tweeting, get that trending, you know, try and build up, put it back in the public spotlight where it deserves to be, because it was such a short period of time ago. Like I said, we're not going to talk about anything because that's not the point of the show. We want to celebrate Cole's life, and we want to talk about the happy memories, and we want to read out the messages from you guys. And what we'd like as well, anybody that's listening to the show that knew Cole, or Wurzel as he was better known for his likeness to a certain scarecrow, only man I know named after a sodding scarecrow. Absolutely brilliant. If that doesn't sum up the O'Briens, I don't know what does. But yeah, sorry, I lost track a little bit there. But yeah, moving on to sort of like some more of the messages that we've got here. We've got another message from his sister Sam, who I lived next door to for many, 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 many years, and was like a second mum to me, really. And obviously Cole lived there with her as well. And she just put, in honour of my brother Carl Wurzel O'Brien, he had blue blood in his veins. He was always Chelsea and Rangers, a blues brother, an old school blues brother. Always loved dearly, missed by all that knew him. Not one day that goes by without thinking of him. Usually something funny that makes me laugh to myself. Carl, you will always be in my heart forever and will always be remembered. I love you, Sammy. So thank you very much for that, Sam. You sent me that message last night. I know that, again, something that's very difficult for you to talk about. So thank you very, very much for taking your time to send that message over. Me and Keith have honestly been so humbled by the reaction that we've had from the family so far. Obviously, this is the first chance that anybody outside the family kind of has had a chance to listen to anything about it, apart from the people that obviously caught the show last week. But they've been so supportive and they've been so helpful with everything. It wouldn't have been possible without any of them. So, and that's what I was going to say just before then. For those of you that are listening that knew Wurzel, or that knew of him, or was at the whole game, or remember watching it on Match of the Day, please get in touch. For any of you that have a story about him, or knew him personally, or remember having a drink with him, please get in touch with us at the Blue Day Podcast, because what we would very much like to do is to be able to facilitate all the messages that come in and everything, being able to get them all together and then get them over to the family, you know, especially over Christmas and the New Year time. You know, it's a very difficult year for everybody anyway. All the messages of love and support, anything that you can send in, any stories that, you know, they may or may not know or whatever, please send them in, and we'd like to pass them on to the family personally to make sure that they get their messages at this time of year. I know there was an awful lot of support, and there was a big campaign, and there was, you know, sit-ins, and there was things outside Sutton Police Station and all the leaflets and everything. So we want to get it back in the public eye again and everything. So, but your messages of support will be, I know how much the family genuinely appreciate them. I know that, like Laura said there, you know, the love and support that they've received from the Chelsea family, it makes it easier to remember him and the happy times. So, we very much like to get everybody's opinions and stories and messages of support in that we can, because he deserves it. He really was a very, very funny man. You know, he really was a very loving and funny man. I mean, there's a thing on YouTube actually that I'm going to get the link for it, and I'm going to put it in the description of this episode. There's actually a video montage, a picture montage that's been put into a video on YouTube of Wurzel's funeral, and you can see how many people are there, and the fact that they had to close off roads and everything because there was just so many people outside the house down at the bottom of Wallerton there, just opposite the Rose and Crown it was. And honestly, the sea of people, it was unbelievable. It was like, do you know what, Keith? I liken it a little bit to, you know, when like Reggie Cray died or someone like that, and the streets were lined with people and all the rest of it, because this like sort of figure in society, not a celebrity, not necessarily a famous person like that, but a figure within a certain community. That's what it was like for Wurzel. But it wasn't
people paying respect.
It was just respect. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't the fact that people just knew him and knew of him. It was just respect of somebody that had never had a bad word said about them. And like I said, it was the wider football community as well. There was people from all over there, and I know they still get messages of support from all over the place and stuff. And there's people of other clubs up and down the country that knew him. You know, he was just one of them fans that people knew. He's a bit like, you know the Pompey geezer with all the tattoos and all the big hat and blah, blah. It's like he wasn't quite as extreme as that. I mean, he looked just as mental, to be fair, hence Wurzel. But, like, he was one of them people, like, remember the old boy that used to go to Newcastle in the 90s? He always, you know, there was an really old geezer who went to Newcastle in the 90s. And he had flat cap, and he was just one of them fans that it was like the Sikhs with the turbans behind Alex Ferguson in the bottom of the stand all them years. They had them season tickets all them years until the Glazers took over, and then they decided, oh, actually, no, that's why they gave up. That's an interesting topic, actually, going well off topic. But he was one of them fans that people just knew. Like, you know, it's just, as soon as I said his name to you, I mean, you happened to be at the whole game, but as soon as I said his name to you, you was like, yeah, I've heard that name. Wait a minute. Right. He had the round of applause. I remember reading about this after the game. So, like, even somebody that technically had, like, that didn't know him and didn't know of him, blah, blah, you still knew him. He was still connecting people. He's still a mutual acquaintance between so many people. And that's why he lives on. That's why his spirit and that's why his memory lives on. And that's why we wanted to do this show, to, you know, get his name and get his face out to new people as well as the people that knew him, because he can still connect you. You'll be listening to this show. If you didn't know who he was before this show, and you're a Chelsea fan or you're a member of the wider football community, people will know him. If you ask your friends, do you ever remember a geezer called Carl Wurzel O'Brien? I guarantee you won't have to ask more than 2 of them and they'll know him and they'll have something nice to say about the man. And that's how his spirit lives on. That's how his memory lives on. And that's why it's important that we talk about it. And that's why I'm so grateful for the family, for all their messages and everything. It is amazing. We've got another message that we're going to play. We're recording this now, and we have another recorded message that we're going to be recording later from another one of Wurzel's very, very close friends that's going to be going into the show. So we're pretty excited to get that in as well. But yeah, just to say that's how we keep his memory and his spirit alive. And the family are obviously so great. They've said themselves that the memories that other people have of him are new memories for them as well. And it rekindles their memories. So, as promised earlier on, listeners, we have Steve Boots Humphreys on the show today, who is a very close personal friend of Wurzel and a close personal friend of the O'Briens, and indeed a close personal friend of myself and indeed the Blue Day podcast. Boots, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for coming on. How are you today?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. I got home at 7 o'clock this morning from my mates yesterday.
Yeah, that is, for anyone that doesn't know, that's not even classic Boots. Getting in the next day is quite an achievement for Boots sometimes. So, yeah, you've done quite well. Something you had in common with Wurzel, actually, that you did, you liked having a drink and you liked your music and stuff. We're going to get onto that very, very soon. But, as you know, Boots, we're doing this special tribute of Carl Wurzel O'Brien. I know that, as I said, that you was very, very close to him. You knew him very, very well. You know the family very, very well. And we've had some messages from Laura and James and Sam and various other people. But we just wanted to get your message, really. We just wanted to just sort of give you the floor, so to speak, and let you tell us about Carl, because we've had messages from people and I've spoken about him and stuff, but just wanted a little personal touch from yourself. I mean, how did you meet Carl? When was the first time you met him? Do you remember?
Yeah. Well, I started drinking with him when I was young. The Rangers Club in Carshilton. That was the first time I met him, I think, and obviously I used to drink with Jason, Marcus, Sammy, later on Johnny, at different times at the Rose and Crown.
Yes, and, which is where we met.
Exactly, yeah.
The famous watering hole where we met, yes.
Right. I mean, when I remember Wurzel walking in and I said, how do you know them? He goes, they're my brothers. So, it's all mental. But yeah, I used to go to the Rangers Club. I used to always have a good chat with him. If he was always at a pub, I would always leave my mates for like an hour, have a beer with Carl, go for a chat, and then obviously go back to my mates afterwards. We used to always take a bit of time and, just always have a good old chat, see how we both were. Yeah, he was always so welcoming,
Yeah, he was a big man. I've said on the show earlier on, Steve, that he was a big man not only in his physical presence but in his personality and his character and his, like you say, a big heart. His love for his friends and his family and indeed Chelsea was always evident, wasn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, I mean he's just such a gentle giant, One of the nicest people you'll ever meet. If I could be half the man he was, you know what I mean, I've done well.
Yeah, do you know what, Steve? You're more than half the man he is, but I totally agree that if anyone's half the man of Wurzel, they're doing all right. But that is a term that we've heard a lot today, gentle giant. That's a term that pretty much everyone describes him as, because he really, really was. But, I mean, tell us a bit more about him. Did you ever go to Chelsea with him? Did you ever...
I never actually went to a match with him, no. I used to see him afterwards every now and then, or before games, or watching football in the pub with him. But I never actually went to him actually on match. Obviously, I went to the whole match with the 55th minute applause and all that. Yes. My mate Haggis sorted me out a ticket for that. I was going up there anyway, and luckily he sorted me out a ticket for that. It's one of the last games I went to, really, at home. I've only been to a couple since, I think, at home.
Yeah, I think I sorted you out a couple of home tickets, haven't I? Southampton, maybe?
Yeah, I think that was the last one I went to with your old man, Southampton.
Yeah. Obviously, we've been about since. I mean, obviously, we didn't get about quite as much as Carl. Obviously, he went all the way to Japan following us on a pre-season tour, something else that we've mentioned in the show. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it?
Oh, no, it's crazy, isn't it? Brilliant.
To think
I've never
that
been abroad for Chelsea. Never.
I'm fortunate enough that I have been, but I mean, not quite as often as Cole, obviously. I mean, I know that he was there all the way through the Cup Winners' Cup run in '95 and stuff. So, but I mean, the one thing that you did you had a lot in common with Wurzel, obviously, as we all did, as football fans and just as family people and as human beings. But I know there was something quite special that you and him had in common, being your love and taste of music, in being heavy metal, and various other forms of that, but metal essentially. And I know that there was one band in particular that we've played a little bit of intro music at the start of today, as an intro to the show. But obviously Saxon was a big thing that you had in common with him. I know that once wasn't there a time that something happened, Chelsea were playing and Saxon were playing or something?
Oh yeah, last time I see Wurzel, obviously not knowing it would be the last time, it was at Saxon. I went to a sports bar on my own and watched us beat Everton 5-0. And then obviously I bump into Carl at the gig, and then obviously he takes me down to the front bar. So he says, obviously, stay with me for the night. And I used to always stay with him at the Saxon gigs as well, if I see him.
Yeah,
so that happened a few times, man. So it was always cool. Because I always go on with gigs. I go loads of gigs on my own. And I always bump into people that I know. And it's just a shame, obviously, the circumstances that happened afterwards,
Well, of course,
it's so sad,
It's, of course, Boots. I think that, we've spoken before, not even just a drunken conversation, just a normal conversation, it's turned to Wurzel one way or another. I mean, I was saying earlier on that he was known by so many people, not just Chelsea fans, but just football fans around the country. His face was known, people recognised his face. And I think what you're saying there is another thing that you had in common with Wurzel was, for people that don't know Boots, and for those of you that don't know him, you should do. But for those of you that don't know Boots is happy to go out on his own and just meet people. He's a very, very sociable person, and that's something that Wurzel was as well. You could walk up to Wurzel, having never met him in your life, at a bar and just go, "You're right, mate, how you going?" And he would absolutely treat you and talk to you like he had known you all his life. "How you going, mate? I'm Carl. Nice to meet you, mate. People call me Wurzel." Do you know what I mean? And he was just, and it'd happen if somebody wanted to have a cry on his shoulder or just, have a chat about the football or whatever, and
I get that a lot.
I know you do, and that's something that you and Wurzel very much had in common. You're very, very similar to Cole in a lot of ways, Boots. Not just your metal and your football and stuff, but also your personality. And I think that Wurzel had that effect on people, didn't he? He changed people around him, didn't he? Because that's just the way.
Obviously everyone misses him, it's just difficult to say, isn't it,
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously at this stage, Stephen, Boots rather, there was a few messages from the family, obviously, like I mentioned, that were sent over, and they absolutely just, confirmed your sentiments and said the same things about him. It's amazing how consistent the messages are from people, and as I've mentioned on the show, and as I'm going to mention to Steve now, we're trying to get the hashtag trending again, Justice for Cole. Obviously, it's been 4 years now, and they said that the struggle is real and the pain is real every single day of their lives. But the messages of support they get from friends and family and the football community and the wider community beyond that is very, very helpful. And I know that, Boots, it's a comfort to you sometimes reading messages of support and messages of love, and it's all we can do, isn't it? Because it is still it's very raw. It doesn't feel like 4 years ago, does it?
Not at all. I can't believe it. That's what I mentioned to Sammy on the Facebook comment. I said I can't believe it's 4 years already. It's mental.
Yeah.
I said it's been a couple of years since I last saw Laura, I think, so.
Yeah. Well, obviously she was obviously very, very busy. I know you mentioned earlier, Boots, that you'd done the leaflet drive outside Sutton Police Station a couple of years ago. Yeah. Obviously you went to the flag unveiling up at Chelsea a couple of years ago with Wurzel's name on the big flag and everything, and obviously his name's in the shed now, so he can, he now lives in the shed, which is a place where only legends live, in it. So
definitely,
and I know that every time that I visit Chelsea and I go into the shed, I always make sure I go up and have a drink with him, just for a couple of minutes and say, cheers, mate, nice one, so.
Yeah, I'm ready in the shed. I'm normally riding lower. But when I'm in the shed, I always go and have a look at that. Yeah, always.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very telling the way that the club have dealt with it, putting his name in the shed, and the way that the fans up and down the country have reacted by having him on like the fans on a list and like all these other things, and the applause in the 55th minute against Hull. Obviously, you was fortunate enough to be there. Keith was obviously
hairs on the back of my neck.
It does. Even when I watched it the other day. Obviously, I was doing a little bit of research into the podcast and sort of making my notes and stuff and getting ready for it. And I watched that as a way of sort of capturing the emotion of the moment. And it was like, it had me broken down in tears. It was, It's an amazing thing. But yeah, I mean, thank you very much for sharing, a little bit of your story about, how you met him and everything. And thank you for
your idea.
Thank you very much. It was something that I mentioned to Keith about doing on the podcast a few weeks ago, and because it was so close to his anniversary as well, obviously it's in a couple of days from when we record this, and it being so.
I went to the hospital, didn't I?
Sorry, Boots?
I was at the hospital as well, wasn't I? So I went down there.
Well, yeah, you was there. Was it? You was in the room. You was in the room a few moments before he actually passed, wasn't you?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean they rushed in, and obviously we had to leave. But I mean, because I saw Marcus the night before. After I got my Saxon S tattooed as well, a part of my sleeve, because that's in tribute to Wurzel as well. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, it was an honour. You know what I mean? That they said like it's family only, but they allowed for me to go in and see him one more time. So I really appreciate that, and I miss the whole family. I would love to see him soon. But obviously we've got all this COVID bull crap, and it makes everything a bit harder, doesn't it?
It's very, very difficult at the minute, especially with the new announcements and stuff. But I mean, hopefully, 2021 is going to be a bit more of a positive year, and hopefully, we can all get. Well, it's going to be the 5-year anniversary next year. Maybe who knows what's going to happen next year? Maybe, hopefully, with the help of the podcast, it's going to get his name and face, keep it in the public eye a little bit. And like I said, we'll get this Justice for Cole hashtag. Justice for Cole trending again, and we'll get it out to as many people as possible. And I think that your kind and poignant words and memories are certainly going to help with that, Boots. So, thank you so much from myself and Keith, the Blue Day podcast, the O'Brien family, and the wider football community. Thank you very much for your time today, Boots. And hopefully we look forward to getting you on the show, maybe for a little end of season review or something. We're going to look to get we're going to look to get some people listening on the show. I know Boots really enjoys the show. I know he's enjoyed our recent interviews with Chopper Harris and Sean Wright Phillips, and the upcoming interviews that are coming up. So, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Doing a cracking job.
Thank you very much. We are trying our very, very best. I hope everybody else is enjoying it as well. But for now, Boots, I'm going to leave you to it, and I'll thank you once again for coming on the show, and take care.
Nice one, man. Take care of yourselves.
Yeah, so continuing on with the messages that we've very kindly got, we've managed to get them from quite a few different places, family and friends of the O'Briens. Like I mentioned earlier, thank you very much to Paul Hicks for the kind message on Twitter as well. But just continuing on with the messages, and on a bit of a lighter note, we do have a few slightly more humorous stories. There's one that was sent in very kindly to me earlier on today by Lorraine Moody, somebody that I've known for many, many years, and somebody that's obviously a very close personal friend of the O'Briens as well. And she sent me the following message. I first met Cole when I was about 11 years old. I was friends with his sister Sammy. I spent a lot of time in their family home. Even back then, Cole was Chelsea mad and me, Palace mad. But it was years later where our banter started. He'd be the first to text me if Chelsea beat Palace and vice versa. The classic text that stands out most was when I was at Palace for a Boxing Day match. Freezing cold, snow and ice, and the pitch had a terrapolin over it. So I get a text off Cole, and I'm thinking he's early with a joke. But all I could see on his text was Tara Pauline. So the two names, Tara Pauline. So I texted him back saying, "Who's Pauline?" And he was taking the piss out of the terrapolin on the pitch, and there's me asking who the fuck's Pauline. I had to face him after the game for Boxing Day dinner, and I didn't hear the end of it, and he called me Pauline for quite a while after that. Always a good laugh with Cole from the moment you was in his company. He had plenty of banter, and I miss that, and I miss him so much. Absolutely one of a kind, Lorraine Moody. So thank you very, very much for your story, Lorraine. It does sort of It does. I can actually picture that. Can you, Keith? Can you imagine texting somebody trying to say Tara Pauline and it comes out Tara Pauline? Bloody autocorrect. Can you imagine?
Crazy. Just absolutely crazy.
That is absolutely brilliant. But another couple that was sent in via James again, and this was courtesy of Mark Turpin, who gave a eulogy at Carl's funeral, and I know that I don't think it's too big of a statement to say that they was best friends. They knew each other for many, many years, and as you'll know from these stories, they half got about together as well. So, his message is as follows. Wurzel and me went to many European games over the years. Bruges 95 sticks out quite a lot, when Wurzel had taken Janet's car to Belgium and got nicked for not having a ticket. Fans were rounding up and put into a police bus. Somehow 6'5" Wurzel managed to get into the fetal position under the back seats and stayed there for hours, missing the game and everything. He ends up in a bus garage where he can hear running water. He walks out of the bus garage to see some guys jet washing and just bids them a good morning. Janet eventually got her car back, no worries. There are so many stories, or even when we were in Switzerland for an England friendly and our hotel room only had a double bed, and he said, I have a confession to make, Wurzel. I said, what's that? He said, I go commando. He said, that's alright, so do I. We ended up playing 3-card turnover for the only very small bathrobe in the room. He won, with me getting the towel. 8 years ago, Wurzel, our mate Chris, our daughter Chelsea and myself went to the World Club Championships in Japan. We were out there for 9 days and we had a great trip. There we are, stood in the middle of Tokyo, Japan, and he says he fancied a ruby. He said he was sick of sushi, even though he'd only been living on Mackie D's in KFC. So we were walking around central Tokyo, and guess what? We find a curry house. It was disgusting, but he loved it. He had a knack of finding a curry house, whatever country we were in. He said the Japan trip was his favourite. Sadly, the big man would pass just 4 years later. And then, final message, just a short one from Mark Turpin, that pretty much does sum up Wurzel in one little story right here. And it's... one more quickie. We were on a mock-up pirate ship. Yes, that is a mock-up pirate ship. On a lake near Mount Fuji. Now, you know it's going to be a good story when the first sentence where we were on a pirate ship next to Mount Fuji. There was a group of Buddhist monks on board with us, so Wurzel went over and took some photos with them, but they seemed more curious of him, and there was all these monks having photos taken with him, bizarrely and hilariously. And I think that absolutely sums up Wurzel in a story right there, that he could be on a pirate ship in the shadow of Mount Fuji, and there's a load of monks there, and they're all more curious of him than he is of them. I think it pretty much sums up his physical stature and his character and everything, and personality and everything about the man. And yeah, obviously following England all over the world and being in Bruges in 95, I'm sure a lot of Chelsea fans from the last generation remember that. I know that my dad certainly does. That was absolutely mental out there. I think about 5,000 Chelsea fans got arrested. But thank you so much, Lorraine and Mark and James and Sammy and Laura and everybody else that sent in messages in. It's made the show so easy for us to do. All your words have kind of made it easy for us. So thank you very, very much.
Warren, I hope you don't mind me sort of cutting in. You mentioned to me off the show, actually, I think you mentioned to me last week while we was chatting about certain topics, that obviously you knew Carl and you went to Chelsea games with Carl. Could you just sort of explain, like sort of say to me and also say to the listeners your memories of Carl? Because obviously you said on the top of the show that you knew the family, you know, you were next door neighbours, for crying out loud. So could you just sort of, you know, just say a few memories that you have of Carl? And
well, my first few Chelsea games, sort of, that were more towards the early 90s. Basically, what happened, I lived with my mum and dad and my sisters, people that I've mentioned before on the show, obviously, and we lived in a square of houses in Waddington, and we lived there for my mum and dad had been there for about 10 years. I was probably about 2 or 3 at this point, and it was the only place I'd ever lived, obviously. And in next door moved Sam O'Brien. Now, we didn't know at the time that her brothers all happened to be Cole, Johnny, Jason, Marcus, that I mentioned earlier, who happened to be people that my dad went to football with and had known from football. They wasn't necessarily like best mates, but they knew each other. They was acquaintances at Chelsea. Like I said, everybody knew Carl anyway, but so they was acquaintances. So obviously, that was absolutely perfect. We had the corner of the square block of houses all done it was just the Chelsea corner, because you had all the brothers, you had the sister, you had me, my dad, my mum, my sisters. If Chelsea scored, my God, did you know about it? Even if it was only the boys that were at football, the women would be going just as mad. It was a really, really good place to live growing up. And I believe that my first 4 or 5 Chelsea games, Carl was probably at 2 or 3 of them, because my dad would have gone with him and taken the kids. And as we got older, like Jimmy O'Brien would have been there, Ryan would have been there, who's Sam's son. I'm not sure if Holly, Sam's daughter, ever came. I think she would have been way too young, but I certainly remember Ryan being there, who was just a couple of years older than me. I grew up with Ryan. He was like my brother. You know, he was 2.5 years older than me. Ridiculously handsome, brilliant at football. It was just like having a really cool older brother, you know. And I grew up and he looked out for me, and like, do you know what I mean? He was like, when he turned 18 and I was 15, 16, he used to go down the shop and get us me beer for the weekend and that, do you know what I mean? We had a really strong relationship. And then growing up from there, obviously I've got a lot closer to Holly, who's a couple of years younger than me. So like, my connection with the family is extremely strong, but Carl would have been there. Not that I especially remember him being there specifically, because I was so young and so excited about going to football. I wasn't necessarily considering who I was with, obviously. But for sure, he was there at certain games that I went to. When I sat on the benches in the West Stand before it got torn down, and I'm talking early 90s now, I'm talking 92, 93. Certainly remember a game around that time when he was there. For sure. I remember walking to the ground with me dad and Ryan and Cole and probably a few other people that I don't remember. But yeah, that was Chelsea Oldham, I think, 1-1. Mick Harford scored a beauty. But even the shed was still there. I'm talking 92, 93 or whatever, the shed was still there. So I never went in the shed because I was too young, but I went to the ground when it was there. At least. So yeah. They're kind of my earliest memories of Carl would have been going something to do with football, and then when I used to go into, because when he lived with Sam, he used to live in he was in the top floor of 3, and then Ryan's bedroom was right below it, so we had to be really quiet from like 4:30 in the afternoon until a certain time, unless it was a Saturday, which meant he was down the pub, which meant we could have the music turned up and play the computer a bit louder and all the rest of it. So my main memory of Cole is having to be quiet, funnily enough, because he was upstairs sleeping, because he got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So that's probably one of my main memories of Cole, having that, shh, Warren, you're so fucking loud, man. You wake up my uncle, he's going to go mad. He gets up at like 3 o'clock in the morning for work. So like, I remember a lot of that, to be fair. I do remember a lot of that, but yeah, just growing up living next door to the family in general, really, not just Cole, but Sam and Ryan and Holly, and like I mentioned earlier, the Silver Fox that is Kevin O'Brien used to go around there a lot, and her brothers and stuff, and I could always hear Guns N' Roses going through the wall. I could always, there was always plenty of drink going around, there was always plenty of laughs. It was absolutely fantastic. Brilliant place to grow up. Brilliant people to grow up with. Like I've said there, I'm still, friends with the family today. Always will be friends with the family. And at the centre of a lot of that was Cole, with his size, his personality, his presence, his humour. So, but yeah, I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit now, just because I'm trying so hard to do it, to sort of like do him justice, listeners, because honestly, do a little bit of research, get on, like I said, I'm going to put the link in the description of his funeral so you can see all of the people that were there, and there's lots of details that we're not going to go into to do with the situation and circumstances surrounding his death and stuff. So, by all means, check that out online. It's pretty easy to find. And you'll see the tribute messages and the messages of support. And like I said, this man has a permanent plaque in the shed end at Chelsea. Do you know what I mean? This is it isn't just somebody. It's not just somebody that we're talking about so highly because he happens to be like a personal friend of myself and a personal friend of Chelsea, and like, you know, his family are personal friends of the podcast almost now. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's very easy for us to talk about somebody that we happen to know and stuff. But this is somebody that everybody knew. This is somebody that everybody says the same thing about. It's like I said, you would never expect anybody to say anything bad about their best friend or their family member had died. You know what I mean? We haven't said anything that you wouldn't expect us to say. It's just the fact that these messages come from everywhere and everybody knew him. Not everybody couldn't be wrong. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. Thank you very, very much again to the family. Thank you very, very much to Keith. I know that none of this is, you know, possible without Keith. Keith does all the editing and stuff and blah, 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 and he's been brilliant for all of this. So I know that the family are extremely grateful to you, Keith, as well as I am as well. You've helped make it everything that I wanted to make it. I know that I've probably stumbled my way through it quite a lot. It's been quite emotional. Usually I'm quite, you know, flowy, but today I know that I've been a bit stumbly because it's been hard to do.
You're a hothead normally.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a hothead, whereas I'm feeling quite chilled today. But no, it's been tough to do, and you know, like I said, I don't really appreciate what they're going through, but I appreciate how hard it was for me to do this and how hard it was for me to hold it together throughout all of it. But I've just about managed it. So, was there anything that you wanted to add, Keith?
On behalf of sort of me, Keith Lawrence, and the Blue Day podcast, I would like to express our gratitude to the O'Brien family for allowing us to speak about Carl on this particular platform, for listeners, Joe Blogs, to listen, and, you know, maybe that they can think about their memories about Carl, you know, the ones that may have met him on a pre-season tour at Chelsea, the ones that might probably sat next to him while he was chanting Carefree for 45 minutes. You know, just general normal people that would have known Carl, and everyone comes together whenever his name is mentioned, and everybody just thinks nice things about him, which I think tells a lot about the man himself. So, yeah, I just want to thank yourself, Warren, for firstly actually bringing the subject up to me a few weeks ago about it. You know,
we've managed to get it turned around very, very quickly. Usually people will know that ever do anything like this, that if we was to get, like, for example, when we had the great Ron Chopper Harris on, it took weeks of mediating and arranging and sorting out, and then it took weeks of planning. It took ages of planning, and we've managed to, you know, again, a lot, like, you know, part of the work was mine, but a lot of the work has been Keith's to make sure that everything's ready and everything's ready to go, to make sure it's edited and like put out on time and put out in the way that it should be. And we've had many, many lengthy discussions and debates about how it should be done and everything. So for us to have got it done in such a short space of time as well, you know, massive gratitude to Keith for that, because it wouldn't have been able to have got done without him. So we have done quite well with it. So.
Warren, shall we close up?
Yeah. Hashtag justice for Carl. Hashtag justice for Carl. Remember that.
We will put that on our Instagram posts from now on a consistent basis. We will put that on our Facebook posts as well to try and keep, and Twitter. We will try and keep the hashtag going so people are still aware of it.
Yeah.
4 years on, and hopefully justice can be served. Hopefully.
Yes.
My fellow Chelsea supporters, thank you very much for listening to this particular episode of the Blue Day podcast. I know for some it might be harder than others, especially for the ones that are part of this podcast. I appreciate the fact that it would have been hard as well to go back with the memory. So let's have Harry J and the All-Stars close the show for this one. The last one before Christmas as well. So for all of you, the Blue Day podcast supporters, we wish you a Merry Christmas wherever you are. Stay safe and carefree.